see you. Thank you very much for giving us your time. Well, I will ask you some questions. We discussed with Renata Avila, as you know about it. And first I would like to say that here in the Institute for Research and Innovation, in the Centre Pompidou, we are very deeply interested in the question of archives. And we are also mobilizing sometimes the concept of Michel Foucault concerning archaeology. And we wanted to ask you first, what is, in your idea, the future of our past and the role of the web on it?
Okay, so I'll just give some small thoughts. But I hope we have a lot of interaction with the audience, because it can be quiet. Well, otherwise, it looks like I am talking to a TV for me, and it looks like the same thing for the audience. You can go a bit mad if you're just talking to a screen for 3 years. So I want people to talk back. I want to think the web in a different way, perhaps even an older way, which is the notion of an archive. Now, this is something that has been, it's something that is the early foundations of the web to be the greatest library in existence, and it is the greatest library that there has ever been. But when we go back and look at the role of historical archives, when we go back and look at the role of archives in history, we can understand what is best about the internet in some ways, and also what is missing. So if you look at Rousseau's encyclopedia and the desire to build up this encyclopedia and the fights that were over its content, or if you look at the archives in Poland post the Warsaw Pact and the desire to protect their content, we look at the Stasi archives in Germany run by the DSTU, and the desire to remove parts of those archives. Stasi archives is an interesting case in point. That after the fall of East Germany, American intelligence teams very quickly went into those archives and started to loot them. The Stasi tried to destroy and shred parts of them, and civil activists tried to protect parts of them. And then there was a long fight as to what would be public, what would be private, and so on, resulting in, and even now actually, we published quite a bit on this, there's a fight over the contents of the archives with former Stasi workers infiltrating the archive, censoring material that's there and so on. The question is, can the internet now be a proper archive? It's a very interesting and deep question, and the answer so far, it seems, is no. That it is not a proper archive. What do we mean by proper archive? An archive that holds an archive of information about a particular subject, or many subjects, that is pristine. So it has original records that are not interfered with, that there's some mechanism to tell whether they have been interfered with, that the readers are not kept from that material. So Wikileaks has tried to be that archive for the hardest case. So for the material that is most likely to be interfered with, most likely to be censored. And they developed an idea that it is precisely this material that is most likely to have a societal impact, that the degree of funding or resources put into censoring an archive corresponds to a perception the archive will affect those groups, hence stimulating them to change it. So I know there's some technical people in the audience. Is that correct? There's a mixture of people. So I'll try and be somewhat I don't want to speak in too technical a manner, but using cryptography, you can develop mechanisms to tell whether material is being interfered with and distribute an archive over multiple jurisdictions. It can be quite hard to do that in a way that is very easy for the public to access and efficient. We have tried to maintain this very difficult balance of having a significant political impact by making things very accessible to readers at the same time as making them very inaccessible to those who would try and censor them. Obviously, the various governments, the US being the most significant, and the deep state apparatus of various countries has tried to censor our archives. And they can read them, but they should not be able to go around the back where they're actually stored and censor them this way. The rest, you might go, well, okay, the rest of the internet shows that, you know, it's not only Wikileaks that publishes sensitive information. Sometimes it's published on BitTorrent, for example. And doesn't that make an equivalent to show that, well, actually you can publish this sort of information elsewhere? Unfortunately, the answer so far is no, you can't. Why can you publish it for a limited amount of time? In some places, it is for a limited period of time, and eventually it decays. And that means there's no proper intellectual continual reference that you can have to portions of the archive. So if you just think about citations, for example, that you can't properly cite the material in a consistent manner, the citation reference, what the citation references disappears over time, and you can't go and look up the citation because the material itself has disappeared. So I think the internet, in not being yet a proper archive, means that its true impact is significantly limited. And for Wikileaks to apply to that archive, now we have more than 10 million publications where the URLs do not change, they're consistent across time for the last 9 years. The material is fresh, you know, it's fresh enough to be politically relevant. We also have material going back as far as 42 years, so it provides a kind of primary source perspective on the development of the world in the last 42 years, at least as far as the United States has interacted with the rest of the world. And these key archive properties we are trying to hold as an example for others to follow. Now, not many others are actually following this example. There's a bit of work done by some other journalists in trying to get hold of material from sources in a way that the sources are not exposed. Some of that work's okay, some of it's not very good, but there's a failure of conception in the importance of, once you have a piece of human knowledge, how to preserve that information and keep it in a consistent form where it forms part of the common intellectual record of mankind that can be cited and discussed and referenced as time goes by. I want to give you some examples of why that is important. Let's look at the recent attacks in Paris. One of the guns involved was an M98. That's a shortened AK-47, a short AK-47. The serial number was tracked down about a week ago, and it is registered to Century Arms, which is an arms company in Florida. The gun itself was manufactured by a large Serbian arms company. Now, it has various forms of export controls and so on that it has to obey. It shipped a batch to the United States, to Century Arms. There's whenever you export arms legally, there's a tracking of the shipment. So there's no registration of it being exported from the United States, say to Sudan, or to a country near Syria, or for that matter, a country near France. There's no record of that export. Century Arms is very well documented in the archive. It's an arms company that previously people did not find to be interesting. And the characters in it who deal with it were not previously viewed, not in the last few years, viewed to be interesting and important. But suddenly they have become important. And we look back and we see that Century Arms has been smuggling arms to various terror groups over a number of years, US-backed terror groups. So, for example, in the early 2000s, according to our records, it smuggled more than 3,000 AK-47s to the AUC. The AUC is a right-wing terror group in Colombia that killed, in the 2000s, killed the most number of people and kidnapped the most number of people. You've probably heard about the FARC, the F-A-R-C. Actually, the AUC has kidnapped more people and killed more people than the FARC. But because it's on the right, the United States and Great Britain don't have to talk about it so much. The person involved is Ari Ziegler, a former Israeli commando who's been a middleman for Century Arms in acquiring arms and selling arms to a variety of places. Okay, so that comes out of our diplomatic cables. Now, there's another connection, this time to Italy. It comes out of a previous publication we did of 1 million documents from Hacking Team. And Hacking Team is a spyware manufacturer in Italy, sold to 40 different governments, including Great Britain, Australia, and Ecuador. And it is used to hack people's mobile phones and so on. So Ari Ziegler also appears in Hacking Team. And what's he doing in our Hacking Team archive? Well, he has become a sales agent for Hacking Team in relation to Latin America. So it is something remarkable that someone has gone from a 20-year business as being an arms dealer, arms smuggler, working for Century Arms, and crossed over without much of a link to working for Hacking Team, which means becoming a cyber arms dealer. So this question about whether conventional arms, this question about whether spyware and malware should probably be looked at in terms of are they in fact cyber arms, does that concept make any sense? Well, it makes a kind of practical sense for those people involved in the business. Their customers are similar. It's all sort of a secret. It's a business that needs to be conducted in secret because people oppose it. And therefore you have characters like Ari Ziegler is able to cross over from being involved in working with the DEA and smuggling arms and selling arms and buying arms across Latin America, straight over to selling cyber arms for the European Italian company Hacking Team. Both those archives were not published because a few years ago we predicted that there would be these attacks in Paris. They were published because we understood the value of publishing complete archives. And I want to compare this to the traditional press, which never would have published this material. It would have take its traditional economic position, which comes from the publication of newspapers, which is you just publish some story at the moment that you think can attract attention, and that way you can sell readers advertisers. It's quite a different conceptual frame for the business of producing information. But when you publish complete, pristine archives, you are publishing the evidence of how mankind actually behaves. And sometimes people are interested in that evidence at the moment. But as mankind shifts its behavior and is involved in different events, elements of the previous record of its behavior and the people involved suddenly become relevant again. Looking at that century-armed story, we did not find that story first in our archives. It was a reader who found it and just tweeted, "Hey, look what I found about this Century Arms. It's there, Wikileaks, with the American government discussing its operations." And then, of course, then other journalists and so on were attracted to it. And perhaps now police investigators, maybe historians as well. So there's many examples of that kind of thing going on. Another example, the case of El Masri, a German citizen, kidnapped by the CIA, renditioned into Afghanistan, into a black site, tortured, waterboarded, and then they discovered they had mistaken the name. He's completely innocent. He was then dumped on the streets of Albania by the CIA to try and make his story seem as incredible as possible. He was taken to the European Court of Human Rights, and the judgment cited 6 of our publications. Once again, when we published those, we weren't publishing about the El Masri case. We didn't know about the El Masri case when we published them. But we understood the value of archives. When you describe human power, power tends to be, in some ways, consistent over time. The same people, the same character, the same events keep cropping up over time. And the judgment was one for El Masri. There are many other events like that.
Thank you very much, Julian. Maybe you could say a little bit more about what has Wikileaks revealed about surveillance in France in general. Could you say something about that?
Okay. France has historically been an empire. In the 20th century, it's been one of the 3 or 4 principal empires. And so the trail of France's behavior and the behavior of others in relation to France is spread across the world. When we published we started publishing a series of cables, which we are still doing. We have now published 2.7 million American cables, stretching back to 1973. And when you've got that many documents, you can start to do some kind of statistical analysis and geographic analysis. We found something very interesting there. You would have thought that most cables by the United States, when referencing a country other than the United States, would have been about the Soviet Union, about the USSR. They weren't. Actually, there are more cables about France than about the USSR. Very interesting. Wasn't the USSR the bigger empire, the big problem that the West had to deal with and so on? Yes, to some degree, but not nearly to the degree that it was solved. So there was securitization happening, which is the security elements of a society, the police, the military, the counterintelligence units, various spy agencies and so on, and politicians that want to unite society behind them by the creation of a common enemy, used the Soviet Union to be that enemy and grew it perceptually larger than it was. So when we look at the cables, we see the American government produced more cables about France than it did about the Soviet Union. Very, very interesting. Not vastly more, but a little bit more. Why was that? Well, the various Francophone countries in Africa, for example, and Southeast Asia, there was a tussle over those. Would France keep them? If France didn't keep them and they moved to so-called independence, who would get them? Would the United States get them? Would the Soviets get them? Would some other regional power get them? So that's part of that interplay. And France has been quite active on the diplomatic scene in other areas. So the US has been involved in this back and forth with France as an empire. Okay. Now, if we move up to more recent times, well, I mean, many of you will know that the documents we published this year about France, about spying on Sarkozy, Chirac, and so on, are very important. Much more important to my mind than spying on the presidencies, the economic spying on the key economic advisor positions within the French government, is the policy, is the spying information from the National Security Agency that we published in relation to spying on French companies. That's the best spying publication in relation to the United States that has been made. Why do I say that? Because we published not merely that the spying occurred, which isn't published that often. For example, most of the Snowden material that has been published talks about the methods of spying. We published proof that spying occurred. We published the internal policy, not within the National Security Agency, but within the Director of National Intelligence, above the National Security Agency, the deep state of the United States as a whole, policy of collecting every single French negotiation and French contract valued above $200 million. So this is a formalized policy that wherever France is involved and its companies in securing deals at more than $200 million, that information is to be collected, and it's to be collected in a number of different industrial sectors, including drugs, healthcare, technical systems, solar energy, and so on. Not simply about contracts for weapons sales, not simply contracts for oil sales, but contracts that have to do with any form of perhaps profitable technology that might compete with American companies. So that's something that all French companies need to understand is happening to them. There's a formalized policy to do it. And yeah, quite a number of those publications, and also the intercepts of the French cabinet and Hollande talking about a number of matters. That's quite interesting for a number of reasons. It's not simply that that the US is doing it. The US has been, aggressively spying. It is that the French government speaks in this particular way, and the US is interested enough in those particular conversations, for example, conversations about the Eurogroup, that it can digest and understand those conversations, even though they're about complex economic matters, and pass them up. It chooses to pass them up to the executive layer in the United States. And if you look at the budget breakdown of the National Security Agency, about 50% of all the spying, all its budget, about 50% of the budget of the National Security Agency, and about 50% of the budget of the intelligence complex in the United States as a whole, goes on political intelligence, economic and political intelligence about other countries, their leaders, their economies, their businesses, what deals they're doing. The remaining 50% is about spying on other countries' militaries, looking for terrorists and so on.
Thank you, thank you. And what about the future of the web in your idea? Michael has helped to articulate response to that question. We discussed that this morning a little bit with Penny Morozov. I know you met him yesterday. What do you think about leftist policy of the web, for example? What could be organized?
Well, I have an extremely pessimistic view of what is happening now in relation to the left. In fact, frankly, what has happened in the last 20 years in relation to the left and the web. It is changing a little bit. Just maybe the last 6 months, there's a little glimmer of something. But if we go back and look at the left vision in the United Kingdom, in the Eastern European states, and the Soviet Union, it included industrialization, and it included bringing the fruits of technology to mankind. A forward-looking vision of harnessing the power of technology for humanity. And the development of technology was a leading component of that. And the desire by left-wing states to demonstrate very conspicuously, sometimes there was a bit of false advertising, but to demonstrate to the public and to the world that they were developing technology. The European left has abandoned technology, and it seems to be that it is viewed that technology is mostly owned by capital, and as a result, technology is something that is associated with the enemy and associated with the forces of inequality, and therefore technology itself is something to be opposed. That's an interesting point. Perhaps it is true. Perhaps it is true that the march of technology, domination of technique, is something that will lead inexorably to extreme inequality. That's possible. But it's absolutely pointless to try and combat it by saying we don't like technology. That simply abandons the space to heavy capital and empirical interests that will invest in technology and are doing so and are using it to extend their own powers. The glimmer that has happened in the last 6 months is, well, there's some people like Jenny Morozov, like me, like Zubov, who wrote an interesting paper about Google, starting to talk about technology from a political perspective that is informed by modern political developments, modern geopolitics, and modern technical developments, and the modern structures of how these companies actually behave. A lot of the philosophical critique that there has been of technology, I don't think is that modern. There's some quite interesting publications in the 1970s, and obscure publications occurring the whole time in Italy and France. But I don't think there has been a modern critique that's usable in a practical sense by by movements, or by politicians, or by educators, or in fact by technicians. Okay, so we also should understand that young people are very interested in technology. So why is that? Well, technology is the leading edge of the new places that the world is going. And if you're young, your comparative disadvantage compared to old people is that you don't have control of components of the world yet. Your comparative advantage is that your mind is free to learn about parts of the world that are still developing. And so this is why young people have an instinct to understand where the world is going, and therefore to understand technology. Because then they'll understand something that older people do not understand. And this will give them a comparative advantage. This seems to be an instinct. This is not just a kind of cultural behavior. It is an instinct in young people to become skilled at some new device that other people are not skilled in. And therefore, when the left abandons an understanding of the development of technology and abandons technology itself, it also abandons the young. And any political project that abandons the young is doomed, absolutely doomed to failure.
Thank you very much. I completely agree with what you said. Really. I would like to tell you that here at the Institute for Research and Innovation, we try to develop a theory that we call general organology, where we try to show that actually the question of techniques, not only technology, is at the beginning of the process of hominization, of the development of the human species. And we think that it is extremely important today to revisit the history of science, for example, the history of art, etc., through this point of view, where techniques is constitutive of these diverse dimensions of the human life. So I completely agree with what you said, and I hope we will continue this discussion later somewhere else, because it was extremely clear what you said, and I completely follow you. Now, if you agree, we could open a discussion with the audience. Do you agree for that?
I do. Just one more comment.
Yeah.
On homogenization. So I've written a number of books which give a kind of dystopian vision. I think this one is in French, actually. This is Cyberpunk.
We can see it.
And another one about Google. Can you see that? I'm not sure if that one's in French yet. So I don't have time to go into that, but I just wanted to talk a bit about homogenization, because individually, it is my personal philosophy that I want as much humanity as possible, and part of what I believe to be as much humanity as possible is as much difference as possible between each human mind. It's why newspapers are such a travesty, because you make one front page and you give it to 1 million people, but each one of those 1 million people, they are different. And having the same front page, you are pulling their minds to the same place. You're making them, to some degree, copies of each other. And if you have 1 million minds, let's look at this in extremis, if you have 1 million minds that are identical copies of each other, then do you really have 1 million minds? No, you just have one. And so, if you killed all but one, you would still have that one mind. And therefore, to make people similar to each other is to, in some sense, to kill them. Is in some sense to murder the intellectual variety and emotional variety of individuals by making them the same. And so therefore, I think as a moral imperative, we need to make people as different as possible to each other and support that difference. And so you have a question about the internet. Does the internet make people more similar to each other, or does it make space where they can exacerbate the differences in a positive way? And the naive assumption is that it makes people more homogenous. And we do actually see that in a variety of ways. So you take the whole world, each person, and you stitch them together, you link them all together, and then you start flowing information around between all these people. What do you think will happen? Well, the information that is the best at flowing is going to spread from some people to other people. Another way of saying it is those people who have the most influence and the most power are going to spread their information into the heads of others. Perhaps dominant languages will become even more dominant and so on. And we have seen some of that. But we have also seen precisely the opposite. And that's a very unexpected effect. That is, when you connect everyone to everyone else, and everyone can talk to everyone else, who do people actually choose to talk to? It seems that they choose to talk to people that they more or less were going to talk to anyway. And so a different kind of homogenization can occur, one that has political significance. To give you an example, Scotland has become more Scottish to the degree that it almost voted to break away. If there was a vote today, new polling shows that it would break away from England. Catalonia has become more Catalan. The Labour Party here has become more Labour Party. The Tories here have become more Tory. The Republicans have become more Republican. And minority languages that were in the process of being wiped out are now starting to re-establish Welsh, for example. So if you think, what does it mean when Welsh starts to re-establish itself when it was on the decline? Is it because Wales is suddenly economically prospering? No, it's not that. It's that the internet has provided a critical mass of communication that permits people writing in Welsh to speak to other people reading in Welsh, and in that way become more similar to themselves. So people in Wales are becoming more similar to other people in Wales, which you think is a decrease in diversity, but actually, relative to the whole globe, is an increase in diversity.
Yes, this is what we call also a pharmacological question, the question of the pharmacon, that is two-sided, two sides, negative and positive one. And this morning, I discussed, I evoked Spinoza, because in Spinoza politics, such questions, and I said that we should reinterpret Spinoza today with the digital and to interpret what is the digital with Spinoza. So I hope we will have an occasion for continuing to discuss that. I propose now, if you agree, to open the discussion with the audience. Right?
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Thank you. Thank you. So, Paul Joriot, you want? This is Paul Joriot will ask something to you. He's an anthropologist, an economist, and mathematician.
Well, good afternoon. First, I need to say it's a great honor speaking to you. I hope you're doing well. We had a long discussion this morning with Evgeny Morozov about the spirit of the new philosophy of Silicon Valley. And I'd like to have your opinion about currently libertarianism Is that a friend or an enemy?
Very good question.
A very interesting, a very good question. Well, there's a question about what libertarian is. There's a lot of people making a claim to interpretations of libertarianism, even the Austrians. So I want to look at just Silicon Valley libertarianism as opposed to Koch brothers libertarian, as opposed to other forms of classical non-violence libertarianism that exists in the United States. Silicon Valley libertarianism, of course, is a rhetorical technique and a set of ideas that are geared to help Silicon Valley companies get their way, just like, in fact, most philosophical ideas about politics. Helpful is perceived for a particular group to increase their power. And Silicon Valley companies don't want to be regulated, like most companies. And they, therefore, push for freedom of communication and freedom of publishing for those companies. To that degree, they are a friend, just to that degree. But as these companies have become larger, like all large companies that have been around for a while, they have become embedded with the state of the US. Now actually for most of them, that association in some part goes back a very long time. So even the very first research paper on Google, constructed by Sergey Brin and Harry Page while they were at Stanford, was part funded by DARPA, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. Association for a long time. In 2002, they sold systems to the National Security Agency to help the National Security Agency better index intercepts. They've entered into deals with the National Reconnaissance Office to, if you like, co-share a spy satellite mapping data. They are described by the former head of the National Security Agency as a part of a key member of the US defense industrial base. So the deep state of the United States sees Google as part of family America, the key ingredients that keep the US deep state, US military, US establishment going. And if you look at things from Google's perspective, Google now spends more money than any other company lobbying Washington. It's written books to try and ingratiate itself with Washington. It's had Henry Kissinger speak 3 times at the Google's complexes. Eric Schmidt has become very closely involved with Hillary in her election campaign. People from the State Department like Jared Cohen, who worked for Hillary and Rice, now head up Google Ideas, Google's internal foreign policy, if you will, think tank. So there's, both at a financial level, at a technical structural level, at a legal level, and at a social level, there's not a proper separation between Google and the American government. And that is true for most of the other big tech companies as well. It's not only Google that is in this position. So it acts in a statist manner when that suits its interests, and acts in a libertarian manner when that suits its interests. Now, interestingly, the amount of times when Google and Facebook perceives that acting in a libertarian manner and pushing that kind of internet liberty philosophy is decreasing. Their positioning now seems to have more to do with pressure from the public that comes about as a result of various people, including me, saying that they have gotten too close to the state. So they attempting to display publicly some kind of opposition to that. They need to look like they're on the side of the user a little bit more. One of the reasons that Google has survived up until about a year or two ago, in terms of this critique, is that it has acted very much like the State Department and USAID in funding all those organizations that might complain about its activities. So it's philanthropic, so-called philanthropic activities are geared towards funding many of the tech sector NGOs, or the various NGOs that would otherwise speak about Google. And this has produced a patronage network, quite a large patronage network, that self-censors in relation to Google and even says positive things about it. And some of it's most prominent in doing that, but Facebook now is also starting to act in a similar manner.
Thank you very much. So, une autre question? Yes, Harry had been.
Good to see you, Julian Assange. Glad you made it in. Quick question. What do you think if the left has failed and there is no sort of organization that can represent the interest of all of these youth who are trying to use the internet? What do you think the future of organization is for people who want to just not simply be enslaved by Silicon Valley or to see crisis? Is there a new kind of organization that is necessary? And what is the future of Wikileaks in this regard?
Well, if you're looking at ideologies that appeal to youth that are new and expanding, well, there's always radical Islam. So I find it very interesting that we have on the one hand these extremities of statism and sort of corrupt libertarianism, and an abandonment by the left, and then Islam as an ideological movement that is expanding. But I'm not trying to suggest, because it's not true, that Islam is going to take over the brains of the youth of Europe. It's not going to happen. But just in terms of its relative growth and the strength of its ideology. Well, there are, I spoke before in this kind of nomological description about Silicon Valley libertarianism, that if we look at something that is more quasi-religious, they have that as well. And that's actually maybe the most frightening thing about it, that a lot of the engineers and top managers, and even some of the leadership, are probably Larry Page, not certain, but a number of his statements being very close to this sort of philosophy. He's probably aware enough that he needs to know that he has to hold his tongue about revealing completely. But it is the dream of the Silicon Valley people is that the computer systems they're going to build will be so powerful, the artificial intelligence so strong, that they will tell the computer systems to create a heaven, a simulated heaven, and they will upload their brains into the computer systems, because the computer systems will be so powerful they'll be able to simulate parts of reality. And just like, computer games simulate a sort of a reduced form of reality, but eventually they'll be able to simulate a rather complete form of reality, and in fact simulate human beings, and therefore simulate, in fact, the people who work for Google and these other Silicon Valley high-tech firms. So they'll have their brains scanned, uploaded, and then the giant supercomputers will run their brains. But now pre-instructed the computers to have a heaven as an environment with, I don't know, not just 72 virgins, but 7,200 virgins, and feelings of pleasure all the time. And they will live forever in that manner. They will never die. This sounds completely whacked, but it is genuinely believed, and it is genuinely the quasi-atheistic religious philosophy that unites some key areas of Silicon Valley. And it's extremely dangerous because anyone who knows anything about institutions and politics and how the world actually behaves understands absolutely that when enormously powerful computer systems are put in the hands of any institution, the result will be one primary purpose: to maximize institutional power. Now, large institutions are embedded with states and other institutions and so on. They also draw on the powers of those around them. When Google is already marching towards maximizing its institutional power by collecting the world's information and by getting ever more faster computer systems, ever greater number of them, and most importantly, ever more sophisticated artificial intelligence algorithms to mine and distill that vast hoard of information that it has collected. That technology, of course, is then transferred over within a few years to organizations like the National Security Agency, or contracts are established. For example, Amazon did an $800 million deal with the Central Intelligence Agency to store and manage some of its information. So it's a frightening prospect if they start to get there, if they have this enriched hoard of how the world works. Google has done it with, you should understand what the Google business is. It's not a very innovative company, generally speaking. It's been very good in its acquisitions. For example, Android. Google did not invent Android, which powers more 80% of smartphones now. It bought Android. YouTube. It did not invent YouTube. It bought YouTube, etc. But it doesn't buy these as individual companies. It buys them and integrates them into an integration system. That is Google's project: integration of many, many sources of information. National Reconnaissance Office satellites integrate that information. Google Maps integrate that information. All the information being sucked down from people's phones, their GPS locations and so on, their smartphones, integrate that information. Integrate the records of everything searchable. Integrate all the web pages that people are producing. Integrate that. Buy drone companies, because drones need more than anything else. They need maps. They need to understand where the people are, where the streets are, etc. So integrate Google Street View, Google Mapping and so on with the drone companies, so you can send drones down the street so they know where to go. Integrate it all. So you have this treasure of information and these ways of collecting more information, and faster computers to process that information, enriches its value as time goes by. And you saw the other day an announcement that Google has bought a D-Wave system. It's a type of quantum computer that performs particular quantum computer operations at 100 million times the speed. The particular operation is simulated annealing, and simulated annealing is an optimization method that can be used to solve a whole class of general problems. So anything that involves many, many different variables where you're trying to find the best or the most optimal answer. And that can do with, it can do with simulating how materials work, but it can also do with studies of entire population, trying to optimize some rearrangement, for example, of particular people speaking to other people, things to do with the stock market and investment. There's many, many problems that can be cast as simulated annealing problems. And you've got all that data, many of those. And so we have to ask ourselves a question: when some company gets 100 million times speed up compared to what was before, what does that mean when it's in a position, when it owns drone companies and when it owns that vast reservoir of information? I'm not saying that this D-Wave announcement by Google is a massive game changer, but at any point in time, there can be this breakthrough in artificial intelligence technology or basic computing architecture that increases the institutional power that much. Now, Google is, of course, dreaming not only for the maximization of institutional power, but for this religious belief about the coming singularity, or some version of it, where they'll live forever in heaven. So it's but we don't know, the reality is it will see large institutions, different copies of this technology, all fighting to maximize their institutional power using the advances that they have, and they're also coupled to the interests of the US state and perhaps eventually interests of other states. That's simply going to lead to enormous conflict and an international order or an interaction between companies that leaves little space for human beings. I find it amazing, a constant source of amazement that economists talk about consumers and political philosophers talk about consumers or individuals, and the whole point of production is consumption. That's just complete fantasy. Business-to-business market, business-to-business trades, in many areas, and maybe even now in absolute terms, exceed consumption by individuals. There's no need to have human beings in this economic equation. The number of human beings needed for this economic equation is gradually reducing. And of course that's going to lead to all sorts of long-term effects in terms of wealth inequality and so on, because you have a smaller number of human beings controlling these large companies and the wealth going to those. But greater automation means simply less human eyes in the process as time goes by. There's just no need whatsoever, eventually, for human beings to be in control of these companies at all. It's a fanciful notion that human beings are the end purchasers. There's no need for them to be in this network whatsoever.
Thank you very much, Julian. Une dernière question, si you agree for one more question? Yes?
Sure.
Okay, thank you very much. It will be the last one because we have to continue after with Christian Forêt. Jean-Claude.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Thank you for being with us, and thank you in general. You mentioned the fact that by abandoning technology, left has also abandoned the use. From where you are, what do you see as sources for hope in this respect? Do you see any movement, any people in the left starting to think about this?
Yeah, just over, I mean, the last 2 years, but accelerating for the last 6 months maybe, I am starting to, interestingly, Evgeny Morozov, quite independently to me, has been coming to a similar position. Maybe Harry Halpin has been coming to a similar position. There are a number of people almost independently coming to a similar position, and we've been starting to find each other. And so I'm quite sure that, well, now I've found Bernard, that there are a number of people thinking about this, not so many people publishing about it yet, perhaps even few talking to large audiences about it, but there's an annealing process. There's an annealing process going on, where we're finding each other and learning from each other. That is accelerating right now. This talk is obviously part of that. So I do have some hopes, but it's very small at the moment. It's possible that generational change within the left, but I don't want to say exclusively, but I don't think it's sometimes a bit hard to define the left these days, whether this is a left or right issue, in fact. as opposed to simply a human issue. But I think that slow generational change in people who occupy philosophically influential positions and politically influential positions is leading at least to a circumstance where you have some of the players are familiar to a degree with technology, so that their minds are easier to open up to this problem. So perhaps that is what we're seeing now. There is another possibility. You know, whenever you see, for example, say there's a large mobilization in the street, do you say, look how organized people are getting, that they're becoming politically conscious about their condition, and this is what has led to the mobilization. And so it's an optimistic sign. There's another interpretation, and I think the other interpretation is often correct. Let's imagine, for example, you see a man cutting, and you can say, well, he's shouting because he understands the injustices of the world. But on closer examination, perhaps someone is sawing his leg off with a hacksaw, and that is why he's shouting. So, what we're seeing in the last 6 months, 2 years, with more people talking about this, yes, it could be a kind of intellectual awakening. On the other hand, it could simply be a symptom of how severe the problem is getting.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you very much, and it was really a great chance to discuss.
I have to say on this kind of, you know, I like to be a realist about things. When you investigate how institutions and people and deep states and so on behave for so long, you see a kind of how things work, and how things work is often pretty nasty. And so I think there are a lot of reasons to be very pessimistic. But nonetheless, this is the world that we have, and so we have to live within it. And so it's not a matter about whether things are achievable or not achievable. Simply, this is the problem that we have to deal with. We don't have a choice about whether we deal with it or not. It's not a problem that can be avoided. You can't go into the suburbs and shut yourself off from this. If the whole society is moving in a very grim direction, in fact doing so globally, and that's one of the interpretations, then you're going to have to understand that and resist it, simply for yourself, let alone the people you care about. So this is the task that we have, is to understand what is happening and to address it, because there's no other place to go to. You can't even keep your head down and become a cog in the machine and think that will save you. It won't.
Thank you very much.